Welcome everybody who is coming in right now. Oh, here we go. Working. Hi, Brad. Hi, Nancy. And you can hear me loud and clear. Great. We are using sort of a new format to put on this webinar. And so we want to make sure all of the things are working. Hi, Lisa, Elizabeth. Hi, you guys. Raquel. Oh my gosh, so many people. Okay. And you're calling from all over. And I'm glad you can hear me okay. And hopefully nobody else can hear the drilling that is happening behind me. I'm going to focus as best I can. Thank goodness for noise canceling headphones. I am so excited to be talking with all of you today about fundraising with a neurodivergent brain and how I and some of my clients have used AI to help lighten the load when it comes to their fundraising work, particularly through the lens of neurodiversity. Gina, thank you for letting me know you cannot hear the drilling. I'm very happy that nobody else is having to hear what I'm hearing. So we'll dive in and we're going to keep the chat going. Please participate. You can throw questions in the Q&A, but I love when folks are, connecting with each other and using the chat to stay engaged throughout our time together. So we're going to keep using that chat. If you and I have never met before, my name is Mallory Erickson. I am the product founder at Practivated. I created a course a few years ago called the Power Partners Formula, which is often what I'm most known for, or being the host and author of What the Fundraising. You can connect with me personally on Instagram or LinkedIn. I love connecting directly with fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. And probably like a lot of you, I became an accidental fundraiser, actually first as a managing director and then as an executive director. And it came with big fundraising responsibilities. And can you let me know in the chat if you also were an accidental fundraiser? Did you, or maybe some of you were like a born fundraiser. I've actually met a few of those recently, but let me know in the chat if you are an accidental fundraiser, accidental nonprofit leader. Yes, Beth is in there right away. Emily, accidental grant writer, amazing. Ashley, yes. I thought that it was just me for a while. Turns out this is actually a more common trajectory than usual, or than I thought. And, when I was leading organizations and in these fundraising roles, I felt this pressure to put up this appearance everywhere, like I had it all together. But the reality was that my nonprofit leadership, my fundraising was this constant hustle. And I call this my impact report fake phase. And it was, it really, I was working 12 to 15-hour days. I was sacrificing a lot of my personal time and personal relationships. I ended up developing chronic pain. And I got to this moment where I was like, I can't do this anymore. If this is what nonprofit leadership looks like, if this is what, fundraising is really about, I think I need to leave the nonprofit sector. And I really didn't want to leave the nonprofit sector. I have personal ties to this sector from when my family immigrated to this country, and I care so deeply about it. But I felt like this all the time. And I didn't understand why I couldn't get things to work for me. And a big part of that was related to my fundraising journey with ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, so not a late diagnosis, as I know so many people are grappling with new diagnoses around ADHD. I had been diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, but obviously the coping mechanisms or strategies and tools that I had been using growing up didn't fit when it came to my nonprofit leadership and my fundraising. I really didn't understand how kind of some of the traditional transactional fundraising methods could work with my ADHD brain. I felt like there were way too many things to be keeping track of all the time. I was having so much anxiety around donor meetings. I've always said, I thought I was the only one who wanted to throw up before major donor meetings. And I felt this constant pressure to perform like everybody else, but that there was this secret hidden under a rug somewhere, and everybody else knew it except for me. And for years, I thought I was the problem. And we're going to talk in a moment about how that is not true on so many different levels, but I really sat with that feeling and felt really isolated in that journey for a long time. And so I just want to say, if you are there, or if you're coming to this call right now feeling that way, you are not alone. And we're going to talk about, why we experience some of the things that we do as neurodivergent fundraisers. And neurodiversity, there are tons of different types of neurodiversity. From a lived experience, I can only talk about ADHD, but in terms of the solutions and strategies I'm going to be talking about today, they span a wide variety of neurodivergent brain support systems. So I just want to sort of acknowledge and validate, though, that you might be coming to this webinar with a lot of feelings and personal experiences that have been really hard in this sector. And I just want to acknowledge and validate those. One of the things that felt so hard when I was trying to figure out how can I make this fundraising thing work for me is that I knew, I had these goals. I had these fundraising performance indicators that I was working so hard to hit. And I knew that donor behavior was a response behavior. I felt that donor behavior was a response behavior. And a lot of my work right now really focuses on this too. And that behavior was in relationship to what I was or wasn't doing as the fundraiser, my fundraiser behavior and my fundraising psychology, the way that I thought and felt about fundraising. But I didn't know how to change it. I felt scattered and stretched and stuck. And I also didn't understand why it was so hard for me to change for a while my thinking and my feelings about fundraising. And since I started my my coaching practice, so one of the big things that changed for me is I was certified as an executive coach. I got trained in habit and behavior design and design thinking. You'll see a lot of those principles in how I share things today. But one of the things that learning journey brought me on was starting to understand more about what is happening inside the brain and body of us when we fundraise, and how does that impact our ability to actually take the fundraising actions that we want to be taking to drive the donor behavior that we want to see in our communities. And so I'm not going to go too deep into the brain science, but if you've come to any of my talks before, you might have seen this. And so some of you really love it, and that's wonderful. But when we are thinking about fundraising strategy, when we're making decisions about our fundraising, we're up in our prefrontal cortex, our logical brain. By the way, that's also where we are when we're deciding things about which AI tools we're going to be, right? We're in our prefrontal cortex. When we go to implement any of those decisions, that could be using an AI tool, that could be actually reaching out to the donor, that could be walking into the meeting. A different part of our brain comes online, our amygdala. This is sometimes called our back brain or our lizard brain. So why does this matter? Why does this matter? Because for so many of us in fundraising, there's this disconnect between how we think about our fundraising and how we plan our fundraising and how we actually do our fundraising. What happens in that moment? So tell me in the chat, maybe we're ready to admit this yet, maybe we're not. It's okay if you're not. But if you have had plans around your fundraising, or how many donors you were going to reach out to this week, or a takeaway you were going to bring with you from a webinar or training or a conference, and then when you go back to actually implement that strategy that felt like such a good idea when you were planning it or heard about it for the first time, when you go to actually implement that strategy, you maybe hear something inside your head or feel something or think something that, oh, maybe it's not a great idea right now, or maybe now isn't the right time, or you feel this resistance to actually implementing that strategy. Can you just type a Y in the chat if that has ever happened to you, where you felt this disconnect between when the planning of something and the implementation of something? Okay, the Y's are flying. And thank you. I'm not saying any of this to call anybody out. I know, but I do want to get to the root of the challenges that we're experiencing so that we can be solving the right problems, right? So this is totally normal, though. This is totally normal for our logical brains to be all in on an idea, a strategy, a system, a tool. And then when we go to actually implement that, our back brain comes online, our amygdala. And the reason why this matters is because our amygdala is what controls our nervous system, our fight, flight, and freeze mode. And the reality is fundraising really impacts our nervous system. We experience so many things in fundraising: uncertainty and ghosting, rejection, pressure, overwork, emotional fatigue, power dynamics. All of those things have been scientifically proven to increase our stress response, increase our chronic stress, and then ultimately that starts to bring our amygdala online. And those things show up oftentimes in the moment of action, or they're exacerbated in the moment of action when we're actually moving from the strategy place into the implementation place. And if you are neurodiverse, there are a lot of additional implications here, because a lot of these stressors that we talk about are actually amplified in neurodiverse individuals, from things like cognitive overload to, needing additional executive functioning support, to heightened sensitivity, to uncertainty around emotional or social cues, greater emotional exhaustion. There's a lot of different ways that when neurodiversity is layered on top of this already a challenging environment for fundraising, this practice that automatically activates our nervous systems in a lot of settings, neurodiversity, when adding on top of that, can make it feel like it's impossible, right? Or that it constantly feels uncomfortable, or that it constantly feels bad, and that we're chasing our tail a lot of the time. And I think this is what leads a lot of fundraisers and a lot of neurodiverse fundraisers to just feel constantly scattered and stressed in their work. So your neurodiversity, and we're going to talk about some of the superpowers related to neurodiversity and fundraising as well, by the way, because they exist and they are big too. But I want you, if you feel like you're kind of dysregulated more than other fundraisers, I want you to understand that that's really normal, that the stressors that we experience in fundraising, when layered on with our neurodiversity, have additional implications and challenges. One of the things, you might be coming to this webinar at all different phases of your personal trajectory with a neurodiversity diagnosis, or maybe just being curious about neurodiversity, maybe thinking that you are neurodiverse in some way. And so I don't want to, tell anybody where they are supposed to be at in their own journey of self-acceptance and self-love. But I do want to say that for me, embracing my neurodiversity really started to change everything, because it allowed me to solve for the right problems, right? It's allowed me to start to accept my brain the way that it was, for all of its superpowers and all of its challenges, and then actually be able to design solutions around what was true for me and what was in certain ways always going to be true for me, instead of constantly trying to feel like I was having to fix myself or be different or think different or mask and figure out how to just do it like everybody else. Once I stopped resisting that I was different and I thought differently and I did things differently, it really opened up an entire world of opportunity and possibility and alignment in my fundraising. So a lot of my work, if you aren't familiar with it, today kind of focuses on what I mentioned before, this relationship between what we as fundraisers do and then ultimately what our donors do. And what we do as fundraisers is linked very closely to our psychology, what's happening inside our brain and our body. And so what I want to talk about today is how, as a neurodiverse fundraiser, you can do some things to, to lighten the load for yourselves and to help you be able to feel into your body in a way that allows you to take the actions that you want to be taking to move your donors forward. We could have a whole other conversation about the system that surrounds fundraising. You should read my book, What the Fundraising, if you want more of that. But I just want to make it so clear that your brain is incredible and your neurodivergence is incredible. And I'll talk a little bit more later around how I see this actually being exactly what our sector needs right now and exactly what fundraising needs right now. But I want to make it really clear that we're not here to try to fix how you think. We're trying to amplify your strengths and give you tools or recommendations for tools or ways to think about tooling that can help you address some of the areas where you feel the most challenged. Okay. So let me know in the chat, what are some of the challenges you feel like you face as a neurodivergent fundraiser? And I don't want you to worry so much about like, oh, is this because of my neurodiversity or not? Just like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you feel like you face as, and if you know how some of them are tied to your neurodiversity, you can share that as well. But just in general, what are you coming to this call today? What are you coming to this webinar today feeling the most challenged by in this moment? Throw it in the chat. It can be just a few words. I'd love to know, keeping focus, wearing too many hats. Oh my gosh, prioritization, implementing plans, deep personal attachment to donors, keeping it all straight, dealing with rejection. Oh my gosh, there's so much prioritization, focus on deep work. Okay. Yes. Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing this. Keep sharing this. Balancing perfection with getting things done. Oh my gosh, that is so real. Okay. So I'm going to go through, here's how we're going to sort of use this time. I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about some of the common challenges of neurodivergent fundraisers in uh, particularly. I'm going to talk about 6 of them very briefly. Then I'm going to talk about some of the superpowers. And then I'm going to talk about some classifications of AI tools and how they're positioned to address some of the biggest challenges and create space for our superpowers. And I appreciate everything that you all are putting in the chat right now, because I think you're going to see most of them addressed in these coming slides. So there's 6 common challenges that I identified, and there are more, right? There's a huge range of how people experience neurodiversity, and there's a lot of different ways of being neurodivergent. So in no way do I think that these 6 summarize everything that everybody experiences at all times. But I'm going to highlight 6 that sort of overlay with a lot of different forms of neurodiversity and are good, are sort of a good entry point to how you think about AI supporting you, right? So time blindness is something, difficulty seeing the passage of time. Focus can be related to that, or hyperfocus can be related to that. Cognitive overload, so being overwhelmed by too much information at once. Executive dysfunction, that can be around planning, organizing, executing tasks. I saw some comments in there about folks feeling like they're struggling from going from the plan into implementation, or actually being able to plan and organize everything. Others are things like masking or camouflaging, which is like when we feel like we have to pretend to be neurotypical, and how exhausting that can be. Another is rejection sensitivity. Somebody said before that they felt like the rejection was one of the biggest challenges they were dealing with. And so our rejection sensitivity, that is really normal. And focus swings, I mentioned this a little bit before, related to the time blindness piece, which is alternating between feeling distracted or hyper focused. Also, I'm very curious what Gina said. I don't have ducks or a row. I have squirrels and they're everywhere. Oh my gosh. Okay, I love that. I'm sorry. We should make that as a sign for everybody. If you didn't see it, you can see Gina's comment in the chat. So that actually relates to a lot of these challenges, right? Around the fact that we are trying to exist, and oftentimes in fundraising in particular, right? What we're trying to do is take a relationship building process, which a relationship building process is so organic and non-linear and fluid, right? Building an actual relationship, like let's step out of fundraising for a second. Building an actual relationship with somebody is not a linear process. Like I'm thinking about, with my kids and, building a relationship maybe with another mom at school. I would never be like, okay, so for our first step, would you be available to meet me at the park for 30 minutes? And we can bring our kids there and sort of see how they are and if we're aligned in our parenting and then the next step, maybe 1 week later or 2 weeks later, we'll see if you want to come over to my house for an hour and we can talk about blank, 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 right? We would never try to move any other type of relationship building into like a moves management sequence logical system. But in fundraising, because so much of what we are tracked on, and for many of us, the only thing that we're tracked on are the lagging indicators, the money that we're actually bringing in the door, which that's a whole other talk about the problem there. But because of that, we try to make fundraising into this like super step-by-step, like all the ducks in a row, right? All the ducks in a row. But also that's not even how relationships work. That's not even how good, real, transformative relationships work. And so this is part of the piece around the system being broken and not your brain being broken, because I actually believe that great fundraising doesn't even require ducks in a row necessarily. Because yes, we need ways to track and we need ways to feel organized and we need ways to feel like we have a sense for sort of where things are at and people's inclination to be involved. And I'll show you all these tools for things like that. But I also just want to say that like that component around like, you know, the squirrels everywhere, there's a piece of that that also is what makes you have superpowers when it comes to your fundraising. Okay. So there are a lot of superpowers that comes with neurodiversity too. A high level of empathy, unique problem solving skills, flexibility in attention. You're creative and innovative. You think outside the box. Resilience and adaptability, although I have issues with those words, but sometimes having a strong memory, like a short, sometimes we have short-term memory issues, but have a strong memory around other more like personal components of things, and pattern recognition. Also, once again, neurodiversity is diverse within that label. So you might not identify with all of these superpowers. That's okay. But I want you to think about one. Maybe it's up on the screen. Maybe it's not. Tell us in the chat, what is one of your superpowers that comes from your neurodiversity? I want to see it because we spend a lot of time talking about or feeling like, oh, we just can't get this thing. But you all have these superpowers, some of these superpowers. Building systems, I love that. Strong memory patterns, empathy, adaptability. So I want you to really like not just put this in the chat, but I want you to take a moment and like feel this. Like, I want you to take a moment and feel into the fact that your neurodiversity is giving you superpowers. And our goal in how we think about AI is we want tools that can help us with the things we're struggling with totally, in order to give us the capacity to lean into these superpowers. Because let me tell you something, if I'm hiring a fundraiser, how much more important is everything that's on this screen than their ability to organize data, right? Although Michelle is super organized and thoughtful, so that's amazing. I wish I was the same in that way, Michelle. I wish I was super organized and make certain things a lot easier for me. But look at the list of these superpowers, right? And thoughtful. These are the superpowers of what make real relationships happen. These are the human qualities of what makes connection happen. So every time, you know, like I mentioned, I spent so many years thinking I didn't have the right skills to be a fundraiser, and it was because I didn't fit well into the system of fundraising. But when I finally started to embrace the things, and a lot of those had to do with my neurodiversity, that did make me a really good fundraiser, that did make me a really special fundraiser. My fundraising started to expand and explode and grow, because these things are what make you an incredible fundraiser too. Remembering that little detail about the donor's daughter and how they felt about camp last summer, right? Being able to connect dots and find alignment between a funder and your organization. All of these things make incredible fundraisers. Okay, so you're probably like, okay, Mallory, thank you for the pep talk, but what I really came here for is to find out how AI tools can help. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to talk about specific tools, how they address some of those specific challenges, but before we do that, I need to give you a decision-making checklist, because I don't want this to be another webinar where you leave this webinar being like, I have so many great ideas for all the tools I'm going to use, and then you go to implement them and you don't implement any of them because you're so overwhelmed and you can't pick and you have decision paralysis. So the very first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to explain, yes, these AI tools can help us with some of the challenges we face because of our neurodiversity. And there is a catch, okay? And the catch is this. There are so many AI tools coming out every single day, right? Like, I can't go on LinkedIn without learning about like 45 new AI tools, or those people who post the sheets with literally 92 AI tools that you could check out. And you're like, who has time to check out 92 AI tools? Please let me know if you have that kind of time. I do not. And so what I want you to have a framework for, in addition to some of the tools that I'm going to share with you that you can check out, is I want you to have a tool to actually make decisions about AI, about which AI tools you actually need. So the very first thing I'm going to give you is a decision checklist, okay? A decision-making checklist. So anytime you are deciding if you want to solve a problem with AI, the first step is to clearly have a clearly defined pain point. So I have had people come to me over the years, particularly with my work with fundraising AI, but now with Practivated, and they're like, okay, like I want to get some AI. How do I get some AI? The point is not to have AI, right? The point is to solve the biggest challenges that you're experiencing in your fundraising. And to solve some of those challenges, AI presents a great solution. But AI is not the solution, right? So it has to start with your pain point. It has to start with the challenge that you're facing. And then you should be looking at the different tools and solutions through that lens. So you want to be really clear, okay? And for the purposes of this, I want you to think about one pain point, and I'll have you, prioritize this in a second. Then I want you to think about, and I want you to do this before you dive into the tools, okay? I want you to identify your must-have criteria. You know yourself better than anybody. What are things that you love in tools? What are things that you hate? Do you have to have notifications on your phone? Do you never want to have notifications on your phone, right? Do you want it to be able to be a plugin in Google Chrome? Do you not want it to integrate in that way because you don't use that or whatever, right? Think about the systems you already use. Think about some of your non-negotiables. This is going to help you with the evaluation and avoid that analysis paralysis, okay? Then you're going to start to find some solutions that address this pain point and meet your criteria. And then I want you to only pick 2 or 3 options, okay? And pick one to start. And it doesn't matter. Close your eyes, point to one. I don't care. Put all 3 on your screen. Literally close your eyes, point, pick one. It doesn't matter. The idea is to move forward, to get over that action line. You're going to trial that tool briefly, okay? And then you're going to see how you feel after that trial. If you don't like the first one, you'll trial the next one for 1 week, okay? And if you don't like the next one, you'll trial the third one for 1 week. Then once you pick the best one, commit fully to that choice for at least 1 month, okay? It takes a while for us to build our muscle memory around things like that, okay? So this is and you're going to get the recording of all of this, but this is a decision-making checklist for how you decide on the AI tools that you use in general, okay? Does this make sense? Can you give me like a why in the comments? It got quiet in there. I think it's probably because people are writing notes and things like that, but I just want to make sure you're with me. This is making sense. Okay, this is so important because after this webinar, like we may have covered your biggest pain point in some of the solutions that I go through, and you might end the webinar being like, okay, I really like those solutions, but actually I think my biggest pain point is blank. And I want you to be able to take this decision-making framework and apply this to how you think about things moving forward. Okay, so now everybody is going to pick one pain point, okay? Not the same one. Can you imagine if I was like, all 85 of us are going to pick the same one? No, you're going to pick your biggest pain point in your day-to-day experience that you would like to try to solve with AI. You can tell us in the chat if you're ready to do that. If you're not ready to do that, that's okay. But I do want you to force yourself right now to pick one, and your brain's gonna be like, oh, but I have this one and I have this one. I know it doesn't mean you are kissing all of those goodbye forever, but for the purposes of this webinar, I want you to pick one pain point in your day. To-do list management, love it. CRM data current, prioritization and follow-up steps. Okay, amazing. Okay, one pain point. I know with my ADHD, everybody says, give me one thing, and I give them 4, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I'm really saying one. So even if you are not ready to tell me exactly what it is, can you just put in the chat a 1 so that I know you are ready? Everybody has their 1, and then I'm going to talk through these different categories of tools and giving you some options. Okay. We're ready. We have our 1. Okay, let's go. So I have broken up the tools, thinking about fundraising in particular, okay? Thinking about fundraising in particular, I am bucketing the tool categories into 2 areas: how you spend your time and how you show up, okay? How to spend your time and how you show up. So how to spend your time, there's three categories under that that have AI tools that address different challenges that we shared earlier. So how you spend your time, time management, reducing overload, and executive support and memory, right? All of those things are related to how you spend your time. When it comes to time management, there are AI calendars and smart reminders. I'll give you some examples of this in a moment. When it comes to reducing overload, that's where there can be AI summarizers, email prioritizers. You could use general generative AI tools for some of this manually as well. And when it comes to executive support and memory, that's like AI project planners, smart to-do lists, meeting notes, right? Like call recording, meeting notes, etc. One of the things I want to make clear as I was putting together this presentation, I was like, oh my gosh, it is complicated. Part of why it's complicated is because there are a lot of tools that do multiple things, right? There's this Venn diagram of certain tools do 2 of these things, certain tools do 3 of these things, certain tools do blank, blank, blank. This is actually why it's so critical that you are super clear about your number one pain point. Because the moment you try to piece together the full Venn diagram and you're like, okay, well, this does solve all of my problems in a mediocre way, is that better than this one tool that really solves my biggest issue in a fantastic way? And what I want for you first is for you to solve your biggest problem in a fantastic way, okay? Because what that will do for you is open up time and capacity and energy for addressing the next thing. But we need to go one step at a time, okay? So you might see this and you might be like, I want all of those things, or I want the AI calendar that also does the, focus time and the task list and all those things. And you can put some of that into your criteria if you want 2 things to definitely be connected. Like you're like, oh, I don't want my calendar app to be disconnected from my task list because those things have a big impact on each other. You can put that in your criteria, but that's different than prioritizing multiple problems at the same time, because that's going to make it really hard for you to actually select a tool. Does this make sense? Are you with me? Can you just give me a little like, yes, thumbs up, makes sense? So the 2 categories here are how you spend your time and then how you show up. So in how you show up, there are a few different, and you might think that the first one is about time too, and it sort of is, but it's with a different problem. Okay, so how you show up here, I have these 3 different sort of examples. One is around managing focus. Okay, so there are a lot of tools out there that predict and optimize your productivity patterns. So they don't just put focus time on your schedule and then, leave it there and randomly put it, but they're trying to learn, where are you actually able to have the most focus time? What's working for you? What isn't working for you? Trying to help you show up to your focus time in a way where you're able to be the most focused. Okay, so there are a number of tools that help with that. Then there's authentic communication, okay, how you show up. And actually, there's sort of a few different layers to this. That's where AI writing tools to polish your messages come in, right? How you show up, how authentic is your communication? Now, we're all seeing all the things on LinkedIn about how to spot AI content and blah, 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 blah. Number one, you can find AI tools that do a really good job with your voice, right? With mimicking your voice and helping you write in a way that's as aligned as possible with your voice. I've heard over and over again, people feel like Claude is the best for this in particular. But one of the things I want to say is authentic communication requires that you're using AI to lighten the load of writing that communication, but you are always reviewing it. You're always tweaking it. I think one of the biggest challenges we have with AI is when we think it's going to be perfect without any human oversight, right? It shouldn't be. It isn't you. There's always a human touch that makes everything more authentic. But this is not an all or nothing world. So find the right tool for you that helps you create more authentic communication that gets you 85% of the way there, that feels like it's in your voice, that's in your authenticity as much as it can be without actually being you. And then you handle the last little touch. And then the other piece around how you show up is around reducing anxiety and masking. And this is where practicing for donor conversations can make a huge difference in how you feel in your body, and then ultimately what you do, what you ask for, how much you ask for. So we're going to talk through, I'm going to give you a breakdown of each of these tools and how they help with fundraising biggest challenges. I want to say in general, I have no affiliation with any of the tools on here. There's no referral fees. There's no QR codes, anything like that. I want to help you understand the landscape and some of the different decision making as you start to identify your biggest problem, which you should have already done, the criteria under that. And then I want to give you some options where you might start to do some research on these types of tools. So, finding the time, okay? So many of you mentioned that as your biggest problem, finding the time to do the tasks, okay? So two tools that exist out there to help with this, Reclaim AI, Clockwise are two of them in particular. By the way, when I scan for tools and do research, I'm doing a lot of research on privacy, security, ethics, all of those things as well. So all of the tools I'm putting in front of you right now, I've done with a fundraising AI lens as well on top of them about the responsible and beneficial use of AI. So two, if you're really thinking about time management and focus, two of the tools that you could check out, Reclaim AI and Clockwise. They have different sort of pricing and teams and superpowers, each of them, but I would recommend, if time management, blocking focus time, trying to optimize where focus time is on your calendar, how you schedule certain types of things with other folks on your team, where those go, flexibility in schedules. Maybe one of the things that breaks my brain is trying to schedule 7 people for a meeting time that works for everybody. Other folks might have an easier time with that. I really don't. So I need tools to help me with that. So again, starting with your problem piece, you'll look at some of these time management and focus. There's so many. You could Google other ones, but here are two that I've done some vetting on if you want to start there around time management and focus. The other piece is donor outreach and prioritization tools. So I saw a lot of folks in the comments, in the pain points, talking about how to prioritize their time. Now, there are a lot of different ways to think about prioritization. There's prioritization on your task list, and there are a number of other AI tools out there that help with that as well. I think we're going to have to send a follow-up email with some tools in other categories because, like Christy, I didn't do tracking time just because we could have spent 12 hours together with me doing tools for everything. But I can send another kind of follow-up sheet with different tools under more buckets. So if there's anything we don't cover that you felt like was a big challenge area for you, we can put that in the follow-up too. But I want to talk about donor outreach prioritization in particular, because a lot of what I hear from fundraisers is not knowing, is them sort of looking at their donor database, feeling super overwhelmed with their full donor database, and then not knowing how to prioritize, okay, what donors, what prospects are the most ready for outreach, the most ready to be invited to participate in something bigger, the most ready to talk about a major, significant gift for the first time. And so tools like Kindsight, Donor Search, Wealth Engine, Windfall, there's lots of them out there. These are the AI tools that are designed to help you with prioritization around donors, who you should be outreaching to, when, in what way, where does their alignment exist. So that's that sort of category of tools. So if your biggest pain point was in that area, this is a category for you to start to check out. Oh, that's very cool, Emily. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the next is how to write to them, how to write to your donors. A lot of you might already actually be using Grammarly. Before the whole AI explosion, you already were using Grammarly to help you sort of improve your writing. Now Grammarly, I think it's called Grammarly Go. They have their sort of AI drafting tool as well to help you with that blank page and learning from your communication, learning from what feels the most authentic to you and your voice. So Grammarly is a great tool to look out for in terms of helping you create authentic communication faster, easier, in a more streamlined way. You can obviously use any generative AI tool for this as well. There are, some that I hear people like a lot better than others. As I mentioned before, Claude is the generative AI tool that I hear the most positive feedback from when it comes to authentic communication and voice and being able to create your custom version of Claude in order to have it produce content and produce materials as easily as possible in your voice. One thing I just want to say with all of these tools, you want the paid version. Okay. When it comes to security and privacy and all of those things, number one, you don't want to be putting identifiable donor data inside these systems in general, unless they have, SOC 2 type 2 compliance, or they're inside your CRM system. So they already have access to all of that data, which some of you have these communication tools, these writing tools already inside your CRM. Use those. That's fantastic. Okay. But for those of you who don't, you want a paid version, the $20 a month version, whatever, because if we are not paying for technology, here's the truth. If we are not paying for the product, we are the product. It means our data is the product. Okay. So we always want, if you're using ChatGPT, get that paid version, $20 a month. Okay. That is really important because that's what gives us the higher levels of safety, privacy, all of those things. And so you want to make sure, even though you're not putting identifiable donor data in there, you want to make sure that you are on the paid version and that your team members are on the paid versions of these different tools. Okay. Are you with me? You guys all still with me? Okay. So the next one is practicing donor conversations. So this is hard because I was trying to give you multiple tools here, but there actually are not multiple tools, which is why I created Practivated in the first place. But you could use you could do part of this with a voice agent in Claude or a voice agent in ChatGPT. But one of the most important things that I found as a neurodivergent fundraiser and my neurodivergent clients experience is wanting to have safe practice spaces for donor conversations, to try out language and to be able to get feedback on how their language resonated, how it landed with the other person, and to do it in a no pressure way and in a low energy way. So role playing in general for neurodivergent fundraisers, like human to human role playing, can be super exhausting. And so I found that for me and for my fundraisers, I wanted to create a space for them to be able to practice realistic donor conversations or challenging moments inside donor conversations without all of the intensity of the human role-playing interactions. Okay. And one of the things I just want to say about this is there are so many different ways to fundraise well in your voice and in who you authentically are as a neurodivergent fundraiser. When we look up scripts online about how to ask for this or how to, move through this meeting exactly this way, that's where I felt like my fundraising was really breaking down because it wasn't how I communicated. I couldn't remember those lines in the script because it wasn't how I talked. And so making all of those things that are out there for neurotypical fundraisers and trying to get myself into that kind of robotic way of fundraising actually was breaking my ability to be authentically connected to donors. And so a big part of being able to practice for different types of donor meetings is that you can actually practice in who you are, in your own voice, and then get feedback about those ideally as well so that you can refine your approach, being uniquely you. Like inside Practivated, after you do a donor simulation practice session, you get real-time actionable feedback on your approach. And there are so many different ways to do these things well. That's one of the things I really want you to hear. There are so many different ways to ask effectively. There are my fundraisers inside the Alignment Fundraising Collective for years have been like, how exactly do you say X? How exactly do you do X. And the thing I want you to know is there are actually dozens of ways to fundraise well, to have a certain conversation well, to talk about overhead in a way that moves your organization forward. And the most important way is the way that is aligned with you, the way that you're going to be authentically able to speak to it. That is the best way. So the point is not to find the script that you can somehow memorize to go into that donor meeting. It is to rinse and repeat and practice and rehearse and get feedback on you being authentically you, because that is what is going to create connection between you and that donor. And that is what is going to help you raise more while deepening that relationship at the same time, so that you're not winning some one-off gift and then it's over. You're actually building and deepening connection with your donor through who you are. And like I said before about all of the superpowers of neurodivergent fundraisers, you have everything you need to connect deeply with your donors today, okay? What you need in addition to that is the confidence to be able to do that, and the certainty that what you're doing and how you're doing it in your own voice, in your own way, is actually able to be received and moving the needle forward on those relationships, on those conversations, and then figuring out, okay, where are the areas I do need to refine, right? For me, it's always my feedback inside Practivated constantly is about conciseness. Nobody is surprised by this. Nobody is surprised, right? So that I'm constantly having to work on, okay, how do I say this more concisely? How do I structure, change the structure and flow of this conversation so that I can, get to what I'm really there to talk about faster? Oh, maybe I'm not asking enough inquisitive questions that are allowing me to deepen my engagement and move the conversation into the next step as quickly as I wanted to because I'm nervous. And so I'm actually avoiding that piece of the conversation. And so but part of this is about being able to authentically show up as ourselves. And then from there, being able to refine us, not fit into some box as somebody else. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Practivated, who actually want to book a demo directly with me, fill out this QR code and just put in right now your name and email. On the next page, you'll be able to actually book the demo with me. But we wanted to make this super friendly to neurodivergent fundraisers. So if you use this QR code and you put your name and your email in, make it super simple. If you don't remember later to book the demo, but you wanted to, and the demo is directly with me. If you don't remember, we will follow up with you to make it easier, because I know in the middle of these webinars, it can be super hard. I always open the QR code link and never take the action. So put in your name and email. We'll make sure you get some time with me. We are actually letting people in waves. So we're selecting organizations and having sort of an introductory call to see if you're a good fit for the next wave. The first wave is already filled. But if you're interested in being a part of the next wave that we let into the platform, put your name and email into here. Okay, so that is on role playing. The next piece is around memory and follow-up. So I saw a number of people in the chat talking about meeting notes and task lists. So this is a little bit of a fusion of those components, but I know I always think in the middle of a conversation and a meeting, I'm going to remember everything that we talked about during this call. And then I get to the end of the day, I had 5 other meetings and I do not remember anything that happened on that call. And I certainly don't remember my next steps or the tasks that I'm taking away from there. So things like fireflies, or we at Practivated use Ask Elephant, there's an Otter, there's tons of different meeting note recorders that have different next steps, to-do lists that come from there. I am always going back to old transcripts. The other thing that I think is really cool about these tools is that when we come to meetings with our own kind of bias and perception inside of them, it's easy for us to leave that meeting with certain takeaways that validate our perspective, right? Because that's how our brain works. what I have found is that it's really nice to go back to some of these meeting transcripts later and actually put the transcript into a generative AI tool or use it inside the system to find out the sentiment from the person on the other side, or the biggest challenges, or how they felt about something. It really helps me like step outside of my own perspective and ask some questions about maybe what I didn't hear in the actual meeting that improves not just my follow-up, but actually my relationship with that person. Because, you know, if you ask two people who had a conversation together, what happened in that conversation, they're not going to remember the same thing, right? Because we apply our own personal lens to the situation, and we always view things through that lens. So using something like a meeting recorder can really help with that. And then I saw some folks at the very beginning talking about grant writing, impact reporting. Obviously, how to communicate impact is a big piece, here. And so there are a lot of different tools out there that can help you with your grant writing, with your impact reporting, with your grant reporting, fusion of those two. The two I'll share here are Instrumental and Cadenza. If you're looking more on the impact report side of things, you could check out StoryRaise as well. But if grant writing is where you feel like you need your load lightened the most, I would check out these two tools as you're starting to go through that decision-making framework for you, and figure out which of those have the criteria that you're really looking for. So when I was doing my research for this presentation, I came across this quote from this woman who wrote an article on LinkedIn about neurodiversity, kind of obscure way that I found it. I don't think she's famous or anything, but I really loved this quote and I wanted to put it in here, which is, the future doesn't need more rule followers. It needs question askers and system benders. And I would say even more than that, it needs dot connectors, or in addition to that, it needs dot connectors. And when I think about the role of fundraisers and nonprofit leaders being the change agents that we need more than ever in the world that we live in right now, our ability as neurodivergent individuals to connect dots is so critical, to bring things together, to make arguments that have never been made before, to find solutions that have never existed before. You know, everybody who is worried about AI replacing their jobs, I don't think that's going to happen to fundraising and to your work. And I really don't think it's going to replace neurodivergent folks at all, because the way we think is so unique and so helpful and so necessary and so needed. So I really want you to think about the way you use AI to elevate your superpowers as much as support you on the you know, the areas where you're feeling the most challenge. The other thing I want you to see with AI, with all of these different tools, from how you write emails to how you practice to how you manage your calendar, is that AI does create this opportunity to do things your way for your brain. And I think it opens up this permission to do fundraising differently, using the tools that help you use your brain and your body and your time to do it the way that optimizes you for being uniquely you. That is, for me, the thing that is the most exciting about generative AI, is its ability to be applied to diverse folks and needs and use cases and brains, and to be able to be customized to you. So however it is that you're thinking about these tools, I hope you're doing it through that lens of sort of accepting where you're at, accepting your challenges and your strengths, and seeing the way in which whoa, that was weird. And seeing the way in which it can support you. Did anybody else see that brain pop up in the middle of that? And then the other thing that okay, that was weird. Well, your brain, your way, and now it is my brain again. Okay, I'm sure my team is making my slides better as I speak, which is pretty amazing. But I think, I know I've said this multiple times, but like, your neurodivergent brain and heart is exactly what fundraising needs. it is exactly what this sector needs. And I'm so grateful for the work that you do. I feel like I've been saying this for 5 years, but it's never been more true. I know it is an incredibly hard time to be a fundraiser, to be in this sector right now. The pressure continues to mount as resources and opportunities in certain ways, change and shift. And a lot of you maybe are dealing with government funding cuts or shifts in corporate partnerships. And it has never been more important to be able to optimize our time, to speak to our donors from that aligned and empowered place, to be able to, speak to them in writing, speak to them in person, to be able to find that alignment, cultivate real transformative relationships. Like we are at a real tipping point moment in terms of the sector. And I really, really believe that you all have the skills and power and strengths that this sector needs now more than ever. So I'm so grateful for the work that you do. I hope in addition to all of these things, you are taking really good care of yourself and your heart, that you are putting on that calendar app when you need breaks and lunch and rest and connection time and sunshine time. Right before this call went on, I went outside, laid in the sun for 5 minutes, listened to the music that I always listen to when I come on here. So a big part of this, and we have this inside Practivated, but whatever tool you're using, sense into how you feel using that tool. How do you feel using that tool? Because how you feel and what you do are deeply, deeply connected. I'm so grateful for your time today. I don't take it lightly at all that you taking an hour of your time is super sacred. And I'm so grateful for everything that you're doing to lift this sector up, to lift people up. So thank you so much.